Today we have Tyler Glasnow on the show. We talk about how trade rumors affected him this offseason. Also, how he's become one of the most dominant pitchers in all of Major League Baseball. And finally, how he's become so comfortable in front of the camera and such an outspoken voice in the game of baseball. Show and Go starts now. Got Tyler Glasnow here. Tyler, let me just jump right into it, man. Name and rumors being traded, like all these things you're hearing via Twitter or X, social media. What does it feel like to hear those things in general?
I think for me, like I've been kind of aware of the trade situation for a little bit. Like even before I signed the extension or like when I was coming back from Tommy John, there was like some rumors with the Cubs and some other teams. So and I think just playing on the Rays, I'm kind of like, I've come to terms with that's probably gonna happen eventually. Like I've enjoyed my time with the Rays. I love them to death. My plan or my number one best situation would be to not leave, but I think I've kind of understood like it's probably gonna happen. And then this offseason, it seems to be like 100% chance in my brain. So it's like one of those weird things you juggle, but it hasn't been like super stressful or anything. Just kind of been like, where do I go? I'm just kind of like trying to figure that all out now.
Is it like, I guess for the average fan watching, it's like, they don't realize you get up and leave. There's like no goodbye to your team and all that stuff. So I guess, is there any thoughts of like, man, I won't have this as my teammate anymore or anything like that?
Kinda. I think I've become like not immune to that. Like obviously I feel those things, but I think because I played with the Rays and I've gotten to like 1 year, let's say I go in at 18, I have a whole set of team, right? I get all these friends. And then 19, the whole team's different. And I'm like, damn, okay, this kind of sucks. And then 20, the same thing happens. And I'm like, okay, that happened again. And then so I've kind of just become like, that's just the way it is. Like you might become really good friends with someone and then they're gone a year later. But you got FaceTime and Zoom, and like I travel out in the off season, so I just go and like see all my friends. So it's fine. Whatever. It could be worse, you know what I mean? Like it's fine. Not a big deal.
No, I think that's the one of the things is like living here in Tampa. I'm supposed to be, balanced, not care about more teams than others, but as an analyst or broadcaster or whatever. But it's still like I want guys to be here. Like I want guys to stay here. You want to see guys do well. But obviously in a smaller market that just doesn't happen. So I'll be interested to see kind of what happens. But
me too.
We don't know. We don't know at this point. I want to talk to you about something that just happened. Shohei Ohtani first of all, $700 million. Like when you saw that, what were you thinking? I know I was thinking like, I didn't even know 700 was in the realm. I was thinking it was like 500. Maybe people were saying 600, but 700 in that realm.
I think too. Someone was asking me about it before. It was even like a thing. What was it like a year ago? And it was like, what do you think he'll get? And everyone was like assuming maybe around 600. Like that may be too much. Blah blah blah. But I think the more you look into it though, like. I think just the market in general, what he brings to LA. There's like a huge Japanese population in LA. There's like I think they're probably, if you can't make $700 million off of him in 10 years in LA, like, I think they're gonna make that back. Like, I don't know. I haven't crunched the numbers by any means, but like, it just seems like there probably was no hesitation because they know the potential earnings they could have and the fact that he's one of the best baseball players ever lived. So I think you think about it that way, it's like a no-brainer. But yeah, good for him. He got absolutely paid.
Were you thinking Dodgers? I was thinking Dodgers like from the jump.
I thought so. I didn't really look into it. I always thought like San Fran, Dodgers, and then like when the Toronto rumors were around, I assumed Toronto just because too, if you could think about it like from his standpoint of like, he already has the American market, Japanese market, and then like bringing in Canada too. That seems like a pretty good idea. But I think he's probably better off with like LA. It just seems like a sick opportunity.
Mookie, Freddie.
It's crazy. I know, dude. It's insane. It's
gonna be
an
nuts.
insane team. I know.
I want to ask you a little bit about kind of this year, some of the rule changes. Did they affect you at all as far as the picking over, disengagements or whatnot? What was different about this year for you? Other than, and the pitch clock. Were those things something that you had to prepare for? Was it something that messed with you at all? How was that this year?
I think going in initially it was a little weird because I didn't have time to work on it. Like I think if people had it in spring and I had like the oblique thing and then like the year prior and like, so I kind of just got thrown into it I had a little bit of it in AAA and then I got thrown into it. So it was something I knew that was going to be maybe a little bit weird to start, but I knew I was going to figure it out, and that's kind of how it went. Like the beginning, I had a bunch of violations, and then as the year went on,
violations.
It got
so weird.
I know, it's so weird. It got a little easier, but like I've never been good at holding runners and like having dudes steal, so I was just like, whatever, fine. There were a couple more stolen bases, but like I was never good at it anyway, so I kind of just thought like it's going to take some time, and it did, and I got used to it.
No, I think one of the things too, like we talking about rules, we're hearing that there could be like an automatic strike zone, right? Like automated strike zone.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on something like that?
I think I got two ways I guess I look at it. Like I guess the way the world is moving in that direction, like I think it almost seems inevitable, but there's another side of me that like I think the human element of it is important. And I think like I don't know how like stoked the umpires are on it. And I think there's so many things that MLB has like kind of been changing a lot for like it's been really good, and I think it's just been a lot to throw on the umpires as well. I think it kind of like, as of recent, it's been a little annoying. I think it might make their job a bit easier, but I think after a while, I think if you implement an automated strike zone, like what does 30 years down the line look like? Are there no umpires? Like what are they doing? And I think there is a little bit of like, what makes baseball magical is the tradition. You don't want to be afraid of change, but I think like the amount of change is happening so quickly, and like, it might be better for a player, and it's like you won't be as many upsets. Like when you lose a game because of an umpire, it's like the worst feeling in the world. But I do think the human element of having an umpire is like what makes the game kind of awesome. So I don't really know. I don't know if I choose a side. I just kind of, I'm like weighing both sides.
Yeah, let me ask you a little bit about kind of that relationship with the umpire, because obviously I think that's something that guys have, especially pitchers, catchers, even the hitter, trying to maybe vie for, hey, that's a little bit too far out. Like, how is that relationship with you? You talk to umpires at all? Is that something that you
sometimes like I think too now with the checks, like you're obviously like you're in front of them more often, and you're always like high riding the emotions and stuff, and like I'll have conversations in the middle of it, just like you know what I mean? Like you're just kind of like, hi, how you doing? They're like touching your hands. It's a little weird. But I think too, like for me, I've been maybe a little bit of an outlier in the way I see an umpire. I think for the most part, it's easy to like hate them, because like no one, you know what I mean? Like if you ask like a group of 100 people, like 80% of them probably don't like umpires. 20, and like I think it's easy to judge that job from afar. Definitely. And you're always like, this is easy, like they're ruining the game. But like those are the best out of the best. Those are like the big league umpires of like, they have a minor leagues. They've kind of been called up. And I think with how hard it is to call a good game, I think people don't realize like how difficult it is. You play baseball your whole life, and you can kind of compare like the level of, like a old dude will be like, oh, I played Little League, I probably couldn't play in the big leagues, but everyone's like, I could probably umpire. But I think that they underestimate like how hard that job actually is.
No, it definitely does not look easy to someone that's played, It's like,
exactly.
You know how tough it is, because you got guys throwing as hard as you do nowadays. And it's like more common, and guys with nasty sliders and splits, all that stuff, like that is not easy to do. So I think that's a good point. One of the things that we're seeing now is kind of like, well, it doesn't necessarily count as expansion, but the Oakland A's moving to Las Vegas. As far as expansion goes, we're hearing teams like Nashville, maybe Portland, some of these places, Montreal. What do you think about expansion for the game? Because I feel like it's something that is going to be great. Now, people think also on the other side is like you don't want to have too many teams, because then the talent pool may not be that great. But I think expanding our game in these different markets ends up being something good for international purposes and everything else.
I think at least 2 more teams would be awesome. I think especially now too how talented the big leagues is. Like I know a lot of people in AAA that shouldn't be in AAA.
Yeah,
like
that's a good
point. You expand it up to what is it, like 26, 20, whatever, 2 more teams, 50 more jobs, and in September it's like 28. I think that would be awesome. It'd be good for the game. I don't think one side's against it, right? I'm sure both sides, like it seems lucrative for everybody. I understand that if it was like 10 more teams, it'd kind of suck, but I think that's a great idea. And there's so many markets too now that are big enough to have like sustain a big league team, and like it's good for the city. It's good. It's like a win-win for everybody. So I think it'd be great.
I think it'd be cool to go to like Nashville and go to
I think
they were talking about like Mexico City or something like that.
I don't know if I don't want to play in Mexico. I think like the elevation there, I don't know if that would be great.
Yeah,
I think
that would suck.
But I love Mexico City. It'd be cool for the food and the culture and all that stuff, but it'd be a little tough for pitching. But I would be sick if you could somehow expand into different like international markets. That'd be awesome. Turn it into like soccer,
the game's going to start off in Seoul, Korea. Like that's like crazy within itself. First couple of games. So but I think that's cool. I want to dive into something that like I love seeing about you. And this is something that I always talk to guys that are coming on here, is like the brand building aspect of things. And it may not be something that you're conscious of, but like seeing yourself do different podcasts, be in front of the camera and be like really talk about yourself and be able to be comfortable doing those things. A lot of guys don't want to do that stuff, and that's understandable, right? Because guys want to focus on what they need to do on the field.
Yeah.
I guess what has kind of been your mentality thinking about that brand that you're building?
I think for me, like I always remember when I was a kid in high school and I'd try to like, even early days, I'd go on YouTube or something to try to find like conversations with baseball players or like anything, like a workout video or like a routine or I just don't feel like I could find that much stuff. And when I think like that was the most entertaining thing for me. Like I love the players and watching the game and like you have your team camaraderie and everything. But for me, it was more about like knowing who the person was or like knowing like what their mentality was, like how they got better or blah, blah, blah. Like there's a bunch of different stuff. But I felt like I gravitated more towards like the personality of a player. And I just didn't think there was like enough stuff out there. I had no idea like how anyone was because there was no interviews. And like you said, I think too, like how long the season is. And you know that like when you're struggling in season, the last thing you want to do is an interview. So I also think 100%. It's like a vehicle to maintain sort of like consistency. Like no matter how good or how bad I'm playing, it's like if I'm committing to doing these things, I can't like hermit. You know what I mean?
It's like a personal check.
Yeah, like it's like fine, you sucked a little bit this last game, but like you'd still be able to like do interviews and like that shouldn't change the way you like, you know what I mean? Like are seen. So I think it's a little bit of that. Like I don't like no matter how I'm doing, I'm trying to like do stuff. And I also just like purely like doing it. It's just fun. I don't necessarily like posting on Instagram and all that stuff, but I do like talking about baseball with people who also enjoy talking. You know what I mean? It's like fun. It's like a good conversation. And
absolutely.
Stuff. And like,
Is there something that you ultimately want people to take from kind of who you are as a person and kind of what you put out there about yourself? Like one of the things that I thought was cool, the reason why I asked is you had a conversation with Mike Studd a couple of years ago and on his podcast. And I thought you mentioned something cool about as a young player, you didn't know quite what your identity was, or you didn't know your identity was in baseball. But it's not the same nowadays. Like, what do you want to leave like this game, I guess?
I guess I would want to say like, I think that there's not like you need to like spend as much as you possibly can and obsess over the game, but there's a lot, I think a lot of guys would maybe younger dudes would do better if they didn't throw so much life or death onto baseball. You know what I mean? Like, I think I have a lot of other interests, I guess, outside of baseball. And I think the second I understood that, like, I was allowed to do that, that's when I became a lot better as a baseball player. Like, I think in AAA and like the minor leagues, I was very much like, I can't do anything. I can't have any fun. Like, people are going out to bars and I can't do that. I have to sit home and I have to cook on my food. Like, I was such a spaz about all that, that it like added all this extra pressure. And then finally I got to the big leagues and it was just like so bad for a year that I was like, I gotta switch this up. And I got sent down. And I remember being like, all right, I'm done doing all like the crazy, like obsessive stuff. Like I'm gonna start like, don't like go out and be a drunk, but I like separated my time better. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna go out with my friends. I'm gonna like, and the second I did that, it just started to get
you allowed yourself to have a life.
Yeah, it was like, I'm allowed to like, if worst case scenario, if baseball doesn't work out, like I'm not a failure. I think that's what I needed to believe. And I finally was like, all right, it's okay if like this doesn't work out, like still do whatever you can, like scrape and claw to be the best, but like, I don't think you should like sacrifice your like your
mental for that.
For it. Like you know what I mean? So that's kind of what it was like helpful for me.
Well, what I guess thinking about that too as a player, because I've gone through that too, to where it's like, man, I just need to just do work every day about just baseball and not think about anything else. But I think there's something to what you're saying, because it allows yourself to kind of relax in a sense and not put that pressure on yourself to feel like, because there's already enough pressure on you, right? Like you're playing in front of thousands of fans, you're playing for money, you're trying to play for your family, all those things. I feel like the more pressure we put on ourselves as a player, it ultimately is going to break us at some point. So I think that's a great point. Was that like something that you just came to yourself, or was that like a conversations, or was it just like one day, okay, I just need to stop being so hard on myself? I
think the biggest shift for me was when I was in Pittsburgh in 17 and I got sent down. I remember being in the office and they sent me down and I was just like, yes. Like I was like I'm sure other people have felt that, but I remember being like, thank God I'm getting sent to AAA. Yeah. I remember being like, all right, this isn't healthy. Like like the fact that I'm like relieved to not be in the big leagues anymore is like, I gotta have to switch this up. And I think too, you just got to know yourself. Like there's other people who might need to lean the other way. Like if you're generally like a person who like someone needs to get on you to work hard, you kind of have to go that way. And then if you're someone like, I think a lot of baseball players are very like OCD, obsessed, perfectionist, crazy.
Right.
And I think I was always like that. Like it was for me in the minor leagues, it was always like, you need to maybe not do so much. Like you don't need to lift every day. You don't need to do this. Like you need to find like what you need, do it, and then try to figure out the rest of your day. But I think it's knowing yourself to where like if I'm already too over obsessed about this stuff, I need to kind of lean the other way. And then I have teammates that maybe I wouldn't tell that to. I'd say like maybe you should like not go out as much, like maybe
or like
in a little bit not more. Go out, but like like maybe you should put more of an emphasis on like your career and then like maybe do that stuff a little less. Like it just depends on the person. You know what I mean? If you play with a bunch of people, like there's a lot of different.
Everybody's personality is different.
For sure.
And I think that's what's cool about the game and how, even from an international standpoint, everybody comes from somewhere different. Right. So I think it's cool to learn that about guys. For you, where did the comfort, is there a certain area the comfort came in front of being in front of the camera? Like, I know you mentioned you like doing it, but it's almost like you may do this one day after. I feel like that too.
I think it was always like, before, remember when you first started playing, like how nerve-wracking interviews and stuff were? I always used to just kind of overthink it and then like try to like think of the answers before I was asked them, And
but I would say that's a majority of guys still, even in the big leagues though.
Right. I think maybe it just comes easier for certain people and then other people it doesn't. But I think when I started to just be like, I'm just gonna like be myself and like try to be as like open and candid as I possibly can. Like that's when I feel like it maybe got a bit easier, I guess. But and I think just doing it a lot. Cause I do remember early on, like we used to have like media training and stuff with Pittsburgh and even that, like I remember when the media would first get around my locker, I would just be like, oh my God. Like it was so scary. I hated it. And I just was, and too, like when you're not doing good and you're a young kid and like they have to interview you, be like, why'd you suck today? It's like, like you just have all your generic answers and stuff. And I remember just being like, all right, I'm just gonna answer like candid and honestly. And then when you're not trying to like live a scripted thing, it's just easier to like answer. You don't have to like think about the thing you said last interview, like, oh, did I contradict myself? Like if you just answer honestly, it just seems to kind of take care of itself.
I think that's one of the things that's cool too, is like when you just be yourself, in whatever platform whether that's social media, interviews, TV, whatever it may be, I think then you're talking about what you were talking about when you were young. You actually now get to learn more about the person and who they actually are instead of seeing kind of the robot generic type of person that's answering those types of questions, which is easy to do because you want to get it done with most of the time. But I think that's what's been cool is people get to learn a little bit about who you are and your type of personality. And I like that aspect of it. I want to ask you about something that you talked about earlier is the oblique. Before the season kind of got going, what was it like going through that process as you rehab, watching a team that was doing historic things in the beginning of the season?
Yeah, it sucked. I mean, I kind of had that issue as well, like for the last few years, I guess, as a Ray. Just like I initially got hurt in 19, and then I've been dealing with that exact same injury for like years and years and years. And then finally I was like, all right, I'm done. I got to get Tommy John. Like I just put it off for too long. And I didn't like establish myself before. So I was like, I got to just pitch and like throw innings. Like whether it's a lot or a little, like I need to pitch. And I think after I was like, all right, I need to get TJ. I got that taken care of. It was like this nice, all right, great, I'm starting over. And then not pitching for so long and then going through that spring training and having that oblique, that sucked. Just because it was like, I got this out of the way. Every injury I've ever had was due to this. And then that's gone. And then I think just like maybe not throwing for a long time, like not being used to the I don't know what it was, but I just had like a oblique. And then I think when the team is playing, there's two sides of it. It's like, I want to be there and I want to participate and I want to help them. But the other side's like, thank God they're playing well. Because if, like, you know what I mean? Like if I was gone and then they were not playing well, it'd be 10 times as hard.
It feels worse.
Yeah, way worse. So I was like, all right, like it could be worse, you know what I mean? But it definitely sucked. But as I got healthy and got back into the season and like you get back into that routine of being there every 5 days, it's kind of like, whatever, that was that, this is this, let's keep going. Like,
no, that's awesome. I'm glad that it was cool to see you come back from that and still be extremely successful. I feel like like you were, like a lot of times coming back from an injury like that, which a lot of people don't know, is like, first of all, there's nothing you can do about the oblique for the first couple of weeks. Like you're just letting it kind of heal itself. But then come back and still be the same type of person is not easy to do. So I think that was cool to see. Tell me a little bit about the opportunity to get to the postseason and have that start in the postseason too.
Yeah, that's been the sickest thing about the Rays. I think coming from the Pirates to the Rays and like getting the opportunity right away to be a starter was awesome. And then like every year I've been there, we've basically been in the playoffs. 18 we didn't, 19, 20, 21, 20, like every single year it was a playoff year. So it was like just to have the opportunity to do that, like how many things had to align for me to be able to be on a team like that could play well, and like in turn helping me, like getting the playoff experience is really beneficial. And I think the more you play in the playoffs, like the better off you are. You just kind of like, you've been there before.
Right.
So I think that was like amazing. And then it was cool to get back. Last year I pitched in the playoffs, and then this year getting into that Texas start, it was great to just be able to line up and do it. We obviously didn't play very well. I didn't pitch very well that game, but it was one of those things like, I'm glad we got to get there. And it definitely left like a shitty taste in my mouth, the whole team's mouth. Like we get, again, first round, like didn't score a lot of runs, didn't play very well.
Right.
But I mean, it is what it is. And I think you can kind of take that into the off season and like use it as fuel, as Rocky Balboa, as that sounds. It really is true. Like you kind of take that feeling and you go into the off season with it.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you before we actually dive into a little bit of that game too that you pitched. But what does that off season kind of look like for you now as far as routine wise? Like what's the focus during the off season, knowing it was a long season for you too, maybe not innings wise, but you went through a major injury and then came back and then went to the postseason. Like, so what is it routine wise that you're trying to focus on going into 2024?
So that's like traditionally, I'd say I usually take like a week off, 2 weeks off. I don't really like, I guess, taking too much time off. Like you go into your workouts like smoothly, I guess. You don't like go full bore, but like I'm not a big fan of like just taking, like some people just like don't do anything for like a month, and I just don't really like the way that makes me feel.
Right.
So I'll take like a week off, still maybe like I'll take like walks and stuff. I don't like sit there. A week or two off, and then you get to like slow into workouts, and then I'll always like allot a certain amount of time for me to be able to travel while also like maintaining. As long as like the place I can travel has a gym that can do my routine, then I can travel. You know what I mean? I don't have to start throwing until like early December.
Okay.
So up until the end of November, I'm like, I kind of can go on the move. I get to travel, I get to do what I want, as long as I can find like hotels with good weight rooms, or if there's a gym next to a hotel, that type of stuff. But it's basically just that, and then I have like my written out program. Like once December 1st starts, like the lifts get relatively intense middle of November, and then it starts to get like way more starter routine-y as December carries on.
Well, how have I know for me, like I feel like every off season was a little bit different as far as training wise, or whether I'm doing yoga or whether I'm doing some form of mobility, whether I'm actually weightlifting. I feel like every year was a little bit different. Has that been the same for you, or is it something to where you've been able to maintain something that you love doing every off season?
There's always going to be like some changes throughout the off season, but I think the structure of, because I've been able to go to so many cool places to train, like throughout. I've lived in so many different cities, so where like when you're younger, you go to those professional facilities. Like you'll go to I've been to Diesel in Tampa, I've been to like Bracy Performances in Chicago. I used to go to Exos. There's so many of them, and you kind of accumulate all this knowledge about yourself, and then you kind of have like the foundation to write a really good program. And then if you work with a good PT, you can kind of like supplement his stuff with your stuff. And I think after doing that for so many years and like building a good program, I think for me, I'm better off working with the PT and then like putting together my own thing, as opposed to going into like a place where there's 10 to 15 pitchers and you do like the same structured thing, which is good, but it's like, I don't want to do the same thing as like a 5'9" guy or like, you know what I mean? It's so different.
Everybody's personalized, right?
And it's like, you can get the basics. Those classes are really good for like the basic foundation of lifting, but I think when you have to start getting into like the specifics of you as an individual, like being able to do your, like, for me anyway, like being able to kind of write my own thing with the guidance of like a good PT and like other coaches I've had, that's kind of the direction I go usually.
Right, that's cool. Well, let's head over to the board.
Let's do it.
And see what we got over here. This is one of my favorite parts because I feel like we don't see this too often, right? With players, they don't get to really talk about what they're doing on the field. And I wanted to show you a few things that kind of, and ask you from a mental standpoint what you're thinking about too.
All right.
Let's dive into it. All right. I guess the first thing, besides the hair, what's the biggest difference between this Tyler Glasnow and this Tyler Glasnow?
I was way softer here than there, I think mentally. In terms of like, this is, for me, that's honestly the first thing I think about. This person never failed at all. I can't touch it, my bad. I never really failed until I got to the big leagues here. And so I feel like a lot of old coaches would tell me too, like, there has to be a time where like you fail. And I would always just be like, well, okay, I don't know about that. Like I was just like in denial. Because I always did so well in the minor leagues. And then
I'm sure that's a lot lot of people's thought process.
Exactly.
Like, yo, no, I'm always great.
Exactly. And like even then I was never like this super cocky dude, but I was like, I'm pitching well. It just doesn't seem like I would have starts that were like rough and I would fail in like the small term, but I think over a full like I was always just good in the minor leagues. And then I got up to the big leagues, and I think all those things you need to learn and all those things that come with failure didn't come until I was on like this big national stage, and it just hit me so hard. And I just and it was one of those things where like when you start to feel that resistance, I started to lean into it more and being like, I just need to, if I try double as hard, then maybe I'll do double as well, as opposed to just being like kind of accepting like, all right, this isn't so good. Like, let's just try to like figure out how to get better at baby steps, not just try to. And so I think that's kind of the same thing when I got sent down, and then I had to deal with like the up and down failure type of thing. And it was really beneficial for me. And then in 18, I got traded. They called me and they had all the faith in the world. And they told me I was going to start. And I was kind of like, are you sure? Like I tried that. It was very good. And then I just got to the Rays and they had this whole new mentality, and it was such a relaxed atmosphere. It was very, very like everyone there was just like, go have fun. Like, what are you stressed about? And then I got to have a couple starts under my belt, went into the off season, worked with Kyle in the front office and like their philosophy of pitching is like aiming to a bigger zone and just like out stuffing guys as opposed to trying to be like nitpicking counts. So I think it was just like an accumulation of like, that turned into that through failure and then success and then getting confidence, losing confidence, getting confidence, and then kind of just riding that wave until
almost learning how to ride that wave.
For sure. Absolutely.
What about physically? Is there something physically that's different between these two here?
I think like, I guess work ethic wise, I've always like been obsessed with like trying, like off season, especially like trying to like make a lot of gains from the off season to the in season. But I think just understanding, I guess, myself better. I think this was more of your generic, like, let's squat a lot. Let's do a lot of core. Let's like, you know what I mean? Like it was like, I put in all the work, but it was very like generic, like, okay, we're going to row, we're going to push, we're going to squat, we're going to do this. And I think I had to learn my like what I was efficient in moving wise. And I think I had a limitation with me and like my range of motion in my hips and my mobility. It was good, but it wasn't great. And so I think it was more about like, this was about lifting really heavy and not doing a whole ton of mobility.
Maybe just trying to feel strong.
Yeah, feel strong and like I'm still growing into myself. And then this is a lot more like Pilates, yoga, while lifting heavy, but like more efficiently. Not about moving weight, but like moving weight more efficiently. Like getting my body to move correctly as opposed to just like being a like crazy person.
That's interesting. There's creating like a foundation and you're able to like move fluidly.
Right, exactly.
All right, let's get on into baseball savant, one of like the biggest things today as far as what everybody's looking at, right? These numbers, these analytics, predictability is what everybody loves nowadays. So I guess first I'll ask you, is there something specific that you're looking at? Do you pay attention to any of these numbers? Are you trying to get any of these numbers specifically better?
Yeah, kind of. I think it's all like just a different like template. I guess it depends on like the software. So if I'm looking at like, I'm looking at like,
the Rays probably have
or some or whatever TrackMan or whatever like those numbers, but it's pretty like I think at the most part if you understand it like that type of stuff, like how efficient I'm spinning the ball, how consistent I'm spinning it. I guess like the spin rate kind of matters a little bit to me, but it's more about like the efficiency and how accurate I am with it, and then like where like the edgertronic film of like how consistent I can be with like especially throwing 3 pitches now as opposed to 2, like trying to keep those as accurate. And like you throw this too much, throw a slider too much, it blends into your heater and your curveball, and trying to keep all 3 of those as their own pitches while being consistent start to start. And then like this stuff's I do like this stuff. I think I have seen this before. It is cool to just see too like extension and like the whiff and all. I
mean, well, the extension makes so much sense, right? You're 6'8", like you're going to be in the 99th percentile. But what people that may not understand is like that's basically how close you are when you release the baseball. And like for a hitter, as me as a former hitter, if I feel like I have no time to react to you, that tells me a lot about obviously your curveball, which people swing and miss at that all the time. But if I already feel like I don't have any time, then I'm going to swing at anything just to, or be aggressive to be ready. And that's where you get a lot of guys. But like to me, obviously the whiff percentage sticks out, the strikeout percentage. Does that tell you anything? And obviously you know that you're great at striking guys out without even looking at this. But does that tell you anything about how you should attack guys or what you should specifically be doing?
The only thing that makes me think a little differently on here is this from 2023? So that ground ball is weird to me because I'm usually a pop-up guy, and so that's what like
that was something that did stick out to me.
When I look at that makes me look back at. So when I'm looking at from my 2022 to 2023 year, I'm looking at. I think the biggest difference between my fastballs was I think it took a little bit of time to get back to like I hadn't pitched in a while, get back to 23, and I think all year last year, even though like I had relatively good stats and everything, I still think I was trying to get back to where I was before. And that wasn't like a physical thing. It was more about like, why doesn't this feel where I'm at? And I think the biggest difference was my efficiency that we were talking about wasn't as good. My carry wasn't as good as it usually is. My curveball was good, not as much vertical depth. My slider was a lot better last year than it was my previous years, but my heater and curveball, I was just on the side of it a little bit too much. Like curveball supposed to be 12.6, heater I'm supposed to be right behind it. Heater I was a little bit on the side, curveball I was a little rotational with it. So I think when I'm losing carry, I'm getting a little bit more ground balls. So I think the biggest thing I know, like that will be different next year. Just because towards the end of the year, this year, I finally started to understand like what I was doing to where I was like losing extension.
Wild.
And my last 4 starts weren't even good statistically, but like my numbers as far as like carry and everything went back to where they were. So I was like, all right, this is on trend to go back to what I used to do. But I'm sure maybe some people would like the ground balls, depending on where I'm pitching. But like,
depending upon the defense too,
exactly.
like who you have behind you.
But I'd rather get back to carrying the ball good. And I think I'm already there. And like even now I'm starting to throw, I'm like, I feel it again. So that might be a little lower. Maybe I'll incorporate a 2-seam or something if I need ground balls, throw my curveball more. But that's weird. I hadn't seen that in a while.
It's crazy to just hear you talk about even kind of learning. Like you're talking about still learning yourself. Like, and what you want to do and how you want to get better. And I think that's a part of the biggest part of the process. Like if we're talking to like young kids too, like you're always learning about yourself and what you want to improve on.
Yeah.
All right. There was obviously one thing that sticks out is your curveball, right? I think, but just for me, like looking at it, the numbers wise, you threw 403 curveballs and only 10 hits.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like you only gave up 10 hits on that pitch. What makes that pitch so great? And what makes that pitch your go-to pitch?
The biggest thing is what you talked about. With having extension and a good amount of velo, it's a lot of times you just have to make hitters commit to it. So a lot of times, even if my curveball doesn't feel good, the only thing I'm trying to think about is just kind of make it look like a fastball for a little bit. Like I throw more 48, 52-foot curveballs than probably anyone, but I think I get a lot more swing and misses on them as well.
Yeah.
So even days I'm not, like I think this last year especially, I wasn't good at dropping curveballs for strikes. And then I think that has to do with being on the side of it, like I said. Like it wasn't as much of a consistent extension. So I think
you wanted to command that pitch
I wanted
better.
to, yeah. Like I think I was always able to before. I could always put some on and take some off and drop it for strikes. And I think the only difference between that year and this year was just like the inconsistency with where I was out here. So I was way more slider reliant. So I would just like throw my slider a lot more, which made it a lot better. It got a lot harder. And I was throwing that for strikes all the time. And I still had the heater for strikes, and then I had the curveball for strikeouts. But the only thing I didn't have was the curveball for strikes. So I think that number would have been a lot higher if I had felt better. I probably would have thrown more.
You could possibly think that maybe if you threw that for more strikes, maybe a guy, it's more in the zone for somebody to hit. I don't know.
I think the numbers with my curveballs in zones are still really good. I think that's why, like, I think if you look at it purely like data-wise, like, okay, this is your best pitch. If you can throw that for a strike and you can throw it above 83, just do it. Just throw it as much as you can. And that was like, I was trying to, I didn't have the feel for it. But as the season went on, I think that's a pretty common thing too. The curveball is always the last pitch to come whenever you've taken like off season or if you've taken some time off. And I could feel like as the starts progressed, I was like, I'm slowly getting this back. And like by the end of season, I felt like if I could just keep it going, I just felt really good with it.
But that's got to give you a lot of confidence too, knowing that.
Oh yeah.
That part of it, but also knowing that you can still get the swing and miss down at 0-0 in the dirt.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was a cool learning experience for me this year. Like I think my K numbers were relatively the same. Swing and miss was relatively the same, and I think like I'm pretty hard on myself, and I think even like I get my printouts after the games, and I would just be like, my spin's down, and I would like do really well. They were like, shut up, it's fine, like who cares? But I think it's just trying to get like consistent, and
it's the competitor.
Yeah, exactly, and it's like I want to be perfect. What do you mean? Like it's not, and so I think that. But it is nice, I guess, especially being far removed from the season, thinking back to like, hey, you didn't have your best stuff, and you still did pretty good. So there you go. Like it's a good confidence.
Yeah, literally a .095 batting average on the curveball. But I mean, like that's just ridiculous. Okay, let me move on here because obviously everybody knows that pitch is nasty. I wanted to show you pregame and just. I wanted to pick your brain as to what you're thinking about getting ready for a start.
For me, it's really just kind of getting my arm going. Like I don't necessarily need to be lights out in my warm up. And traditionally, like if I suck in my warm ups, I shove. So like I don't really put too much weight.
I feel like we hear that so much with some pitchers.
Something about like, it's not, I don't really care. I don't really think about my warm ups in general, good or bad, as much as I used to. But I think like, it almost seems like when they were really good, you would be so good, you were like, I need to take this out to the game, and you'd kind of think about it too much. To where now I'm just like, I don't care. And even too, like, we're here at Yankee Stadium when you're doing your warm-ups, and like, sometimes they're not good, they're not bad. Everyone's up there talking shit. Like, it's hilarious. And it's like, and there's like, oh, that looks bad. And I'm like, no, you just wait. It'll be fine. Like, so it's more about just like getting my direction right, making sure my mechanics are good, not opening up too soon. And when I watch this video, it seems a little bit of opening up too soon.
You're already looking at what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, but it's just about just getting warmed up and then throwing the next few, like the last couple hard, getting them game speed, and then the biggest ones for me are when I get out there, the first 8 pitches you throw. Those are the ones. I just want to feel good, not tire myself out, and get like, just make sure I can get revved up to 100%.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. What are you talking to Snyder about here? Like, or what are the conversations normally like?
It'll be like, depending on what I feel that day, it'll be like, do you think I'm opening up too soon? Like kind of what I just talked about. Or if he sees something, I'll be just like, what you got? Kind of giving an open-ended thing. Or a lot of times, like especially this last year, like I was talking about, I was kind of messing with, my body felt a little different in terms of how I was going down the mound, which was leading to this. So we were always just like experimenting during the like practice week, and then in here kind of checking back. And I think my biggest thing with Kyle, in the shortest answer, is he's probably just looking at my direction, if I'm spinning off too much or if I'm opening up too early, and then just kind of letting me know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It sounds like a great relationship.
Yeah, he's the man. He's awesome.
And you never hear anything bad about him either.
No, he's the best.
Sounds amazing. This to me, I pulled up because this is a game against the Orioles. I think it was sometime in maybe September, maybe August. But it stuck out to me because you literally had, I think it was 10 strikeouts. But the first one was a fastball.
Ball.
Maybe, yeah, definitely a ball. But every one after that was literally a curveball.
Yeah.
Like every single one. And and some of these pitches are just like horrible as far as what I'm looking for as a hitter.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's something that sticks out to me is, the confidence that you have to be able to throw that at any count, any time, and get those types of swings.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think when you see that? And this is the Orioles, like one of the better offenses in baseball this past year.
Yeah, they got me this year like a few times. Like, I know how good that team is. I think for me, especially this game, I think a lot of it is just like my tunneling was good. Like my release point was consistent for the most part, to where I could just shape everything down the middle and they were going to look right. Like even towards the end right there, you see that one curveball was completely across, like not good. But I think in the beginning, the games that I'm really on, and I think especially this one when I'm getting the high strikeout numbers, it's like everything is happening here. It's all the same location.
Right.
It's one of those days where the heater is in the middle and the curveball could be 52 feet, but it doesn't matter because it looks exactly like a fastball until it doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not out there really trying to like pinpoint my curveball in a certain spot. I'm just trying to make it look like a heater.
What about as far as your approach with the heater? Are you trying to play up?
I'm trying to elevate. Depends on who it is. Like there's certain guys that are great at like getting on top of a baseball. But for the most part, I'm pitching to my strength. I'm going like middle up, and I'm trying to expand all game long. And then at times, if I'm feeling good, and I know a guy has a weakness, being at like low and away is a pretty relatively easy spot for me to go. But I'm a north-south guy, so I'm for the most part living in that.
Yeah, it's gonna be hard to get on top. I mean, the guys have talked about how it looks like literally the ball is just continues to rise, and that's something that if I'm trying to go against, knowing that you're going to use the curveball at some point during the at-bat, like that's going to be a tough pitch to get to because I'm looking at a fastball. I can tell myself starting down here, but if it still ends up right here, I'm done. I can't get to that pitch.
Exactly.
So.
I think that's what the frustrating thing was a little bit about this year as well. Like with what I was telling you with the metrics, they come back with the carry. It's and when you're a middle up guy, you want that nice, efficient carry where you're getting 20 inches every single time. And I think with that being down, I had more cut this year to where like me as the pitcher middle up, I couldn't really execute as much as I like really wanted to. But I think with the added cut, I got away with it. So
I'm still thinking like to cut at 90 or 100 up in the zone is still going to be tough to get to.
Yeah.
All right. This was something that obviously we're going into the playoffs last year. I thought this was, I wanted to get kind of your mentality because it was a game in which you were battling. We're going to the 5th inning, but you're at 87 pitches, I think it is, with bases loaded. Texas had only scored a couple runs. You're keeping the game close. But what's the mentality in this playoff game as far as where you are right now? Bases loaded. You're trying to get out of this. What do you think? Even Cash is like, man, we got to get this guy out. Like, what's the thought process in this moment? Bases, and how do you slow it down a little bit?
I think I'm like trying to identify it as a situation that I don't need to slow down. Like it sounds weird, but I'm just like, okay, I'm just throwing a pitch to a guy right now. Like I think all the thoughts definitely creep in. I think early in my career too, it was like I was very aware of the situation. I was like, oh my God, it's 1-2 base loaded. This guy, I'm like going over all the scenarios. And every time I've ever done that where I'm like, okay, like try to calm down, it doesn't work. So I think it's more about like, all right, it kind of sucks. Like I'm not in a great situation, like accepting the fact that like, it's like, it is what it is. Right. It's just one pitch, like next pitch. And then like you get those thoughts in the back of your head, but just don't really give don't give into them, I guess. Right. It's more about like, I'm here, here's the mound, there's the catcher. It's just one pitch, throw the pitch, get back on the mound, throw the pitch. And then the more I can get into that, like, you shoot jumpers. Yeah. Someone just passes you the ball, you shoot. You pass the ball and you shoot.
Like in that rhythm.
Yeah, and there's no conscious thought. It's just happening. Right. And it's way harder in situations like this. But if you're like, my goal is to get to just like shooting jumpers, and my head is, I'm thinking about just trying to get into a rhythm as opposed to like, don't give up a home. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to like.
Yeah, that's kind of the thought process you have to be in. Otherwise, it's going to happen. Yeah. Right? Like, I highlight 87 pitches because obviously you're getting towards that 100 mark, right? Mm-hmm. Or even that 90 in general.
Is this before or after I got hit in the leg?
This was after. This was after, okay. For sure. That was another thing too. The fact that you got hit in the leg, like you're battling through this one, and obviously not the best defense in this game either. But are you? From the Rays standpoint, almost a point where you expect either Cash to come out, maybe if it's not you, but somebody else. Mm-hmm. And then you get Josh Young here. Let me start this, if I can. You get Josh Young, right? And we get you're feeling good. Mm-hmm. Are you thinking you're going back out for the 6th there?
I think.
Because the reason why I asked is because normally with the Rays specifically, there was already 2 guys. I think Littell and Davinsky were already warming up. Yeah. Are you thinking you're going back out at that point?
I think for me, like playing with the Rays, I think there's been so many times where I think I'm coming out and I don't, and then there's times that I think like it's just it's so different every time that I'm always like, I'm just here to, like, I'm pitching. Like, I don't really come out the field like, all right, it's over. I'm kind of just like, I'm thinking, I'm only at 87 pitches, so I'm like, I usually get 100.
Right.
Here, I'm like, I'm going back out. I'm thinking it the whole time. Like, I don't really want to get taken out. It is what it is. I go back in. No one told me I was out. I'm just trying to like center my brain and go back out. And then the next inning sucks. So that's 2020.
No, that's what I was going to ask you. Is kind of like when you answered it. Like you're definitely thinking about going back out.
I'm not trying to come out. No.
Yeah. No. And nobody wants to be out in that situation, especially in playoffs. And then I guess not the best finish right in the 6th inning, but
not good at all.
I want to ask kind of knowing that that's the last start of your 2023 season, what do you take into leaving with that? I know it's not the best taste in the mouth. What do you leave? What do you go with now?
No, it was the worst. Like, especially going in after that game, like where it's 2-0 and then they end up scoring, it's 4-0. When I'm inside, that's a terrible feeling. It's any baseball player will tell you that sucks. Like, not a good feeling.
Right.
But I think, like, going through it before and like understanding like not every game is going to be perfect. Like, it sucks for a while. Like I was pretty pissed off for a long time. Like, you even still get flashbacks of like, damn, like that sucks. But it's one of those things, like, I'm not gonna like, you know what I mean? Like there's worse things.
I think that's important to verbalize too, though. It's like it's okay. Like,
for sure.
It's okay for that to be an issue for a little bit because you're a competitor. Like, you want to do the best for your team. And I argue that was still a great start because that you were battling the whole time. And you were getting out of jams too. So.
Yeah, I definitely, but it is one of those things too. You can also use it like when you end the season on a bad note like this, like you do take it into your off season. You're like, it's very, very motivating, and that's cool. Very much a fuel to take in and do something. But I think too, like for worst case scenario, you try not to go too into it because it's like the worst I've ever felt. Like the most I've ever failed in baseball, I didn't feel that there. So it's like, it could be worse. You know what I mean? Like, and then I felt way better. It can be better. So you kind of leave yourself into like, just as long as I work hard, I come back, use this as fuel, it's going to work out. I'll be good.
No, that's awesome, man. I think that's an amazing thought process. I guess lastly, this is a picture that somebody highlighted some mechanical things. Is there anything specific you're thinking about mechanically just warming up, getting ready in the game? Like,
Actually,
because I think I don't even know whose picture this is.
Yeah,
but somebody
I've
had
seen this a
mentioned
bunch.
about the leg kick. Somebody had mentioned about the extension and follow through. Are you thinking about any of those things?
No, that's like all practice stuff. And I think you move the way you move from when you're young, and then you try to reinforce it and get into good patterns. Like I used to be really tight and like when I was little and never stretched and everything, and like I pitched a lot different. And I think as I became like a gangly human being and like learned the mobility patterns and stuff, like the only thing, I remember this game very vividly because I remember being like, I feel dangerous. Like I felt smooth, I felt unbelievable. And I remember, especially this is 21, I think, right?
Yeah, I think this is 2021.
So I remember the cues that I used in this
too.
spring training was everything was like hold the ball like an egg. Everything was like every part of my body needs to be relaxed and smooth. Like when you're playing, you know what I mean? Like, and you're trying to like do something,
right?
It just doesn't happen as smooth.
Yeah.
My only cue this spring training was like how like floppy my hands are, and my leg is like, I want my foot to be kind of like goopy up there.
Yeah, just everything.
I'm
relaxed.
just trying to be Gumby. I'm trying to stay stacked over my backside, and once I feel my balance, just everything go forward. And this game, it timed up perfectly.
That was something that stuck out to me too. And I think it's in your career, your short career, in which you have a lot more to go. But for someone that's 6'8", like everything seems still relaxed. A lot of times you'll see taller guys herky jerky, like trying to throw hard.
Yeah,
it almost comes like in a smoothness from you.
For sure, it's like one of those. If you can achieve the goopy freeing feeling, the 100 is effortless. And then there's times in the season where you kind of do have to start. Like you might not feel so good that you have more of like a conscious cue where it's like a little cheat code, you know, you're just trying to get by.
Right.
But for the most part, like my best days, if I can be like relaxed like this, and then the days I can't, it's just trying to find the cues in between to get me through. And
what
then
are you
hopefully the next, exactly. Like just try to scrape along and get through the start, you know?
I guess the last thing I have for you, and we'll kind of end it on this, is through what you've learned in your course of playing, all the way from when you were young to this point today, what would you tell somebody that's trying to be in the shoes of Tyler Glasnow one day? Like, what would you want them to know coming up?
I would say work as hard as you possibly can. Like make sure you can do everything in your power to succeed, but don't take yourself too seriously. Like don't do it to the expense of your teammates or like other people around you. Like show up, do your work, do everything you possibly can, sacrifice things, like know that this is your goal and you'll shoo away a lot of other things to achieve this goal, but do it while trying to be the best teammate you possibly can be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that because it's a relational aspect to it. And
you make your season a lot less stressful too.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. Like that's important. I think for me, like that was one of the things while I was playing was like, if you can be a good teammate, if you can be able to have the right mentality, like that stuff you can take outside of baseball at some point. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to bring you on too, is because there's a conversational, relational aspect to you that people really love, and I wanted to kind of figure out where that came from, and it's been amazing talking to you. So
thanks for having me on, dude. This was super fun. Appreciate it, dude. Yeah,
appreciate it.
That was awesome.